Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the LCI Green Room. I am Jacob Winograd, host of the Biblical Anarchy podcast here at the Libertarian Christian Institute, part of our Christians for Liberty network. I'm excited to be streaming to you guys tonight with Angela McArdle. Angela is the chair of the Libertarian Party and one of the co-founders of, I think, both Rage Against the War Machine and Rescue the Republic, correct?
That's right.
Yes. So you are libertarian Wonder Woman. You have your hands in just about everything. I don't know how you do it. I spent all my time, I guess, with 5 kids and doing this, but you're out there trying to make libertarians relevant, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So I don't think you need too much of an introduction, Angela. You've been on the show before, and I don't think we need to waste too much time there. I did want to start out by just asking you, I just mentioned you're the co-founders of both those events / coalitions, and those happened not this past weekend, but 2 weekends ago. Do you want to just maybe fill people in who maybe aren't familiar with those events, just what those are, how they were birthed, and then kind of what happened the 2 weekends ago, kind of what just the basic summary of all those events?
Sure. So Rage Against the War Machine is a left-right unity coalition event series that is an anti-war event. And it was the product of coalition work between myself and the Libertarian Party and Nick Brana and the People's Party. We had the first one as like an act of resistance and being outspoken in opposition to the United States involvement in the war between Ukraine and Russia. And we did it again just a couple weekends ago with an emphasis more on Israel and Gaza and our involvement over there. That's the first one.
Right. And then the Rescue the Republic rally. So what is that? 'Cause that took place the day after, and you guys did it in the same exact space. So how related and intermingled is it? I know you had your hands in both of them, but what's the overlap and what's the difference?
There's definitely overlap. At the first Rage Against the War Machine, I met a guy named Matt Toon, who was the creative force behind Defeat the Mandates, which was a big anti-mandate, anti-lockdown event that took place in DC. I think that took place in 2022. And it was amazing. And they had another one in LA, and I attended the LA version. And he was really inspired by Rage Against the War Machine. And Matt's not a super political guy, but he was like, shouldn't we mix our things together? Isn't this very much what being an American is about? There's something, they're related, right? I don't know what it is. And I was like, yes, you're onto something. Let's sit down and work on it. So we did. And I also met Brett Weinstein serendipitously after that. And he just made a beeline towards me. We were speaking on a panel together at something called the Independent National Convention. And he was like, you're smart, you're onto something. I don't know what it is, but I need to talk to you. Libertarians, you're mostly right. And so we had a conversation, and the three of us just started working together to build this event.
Isn't it funny? No one ever comes up to you as a libertarian and goes, "Oh, you guys are completely right." It's always like, "Well, you're mostly right," and then they gotta, tell us where we're wrong about something.
He has since come around though and said that libertarianism is the only thing that liberty is the only thing where you can completely maximize it, and it's a good thing, individual freedom and individual rights. So I was like, I think you're saying we're all the way right. You're just finding a cerebral academic way to put it, but I'll take it.
There are so many people, many of whom were at this rally, who I like to say in sort of using Christian vernacular, who are so close to the kingdom, right?
Yes.
Yes. They almost get it. You just want to just give them a little nudge into the.
That's why I'm doing outreach to them. I'm like low hanging fruit, pick it all. Very exciting.
Yeah. It was. Let me tell you, not just myself, but I was there for the Sunday event, Rescue the Republic, with Doug, who is our CEO, and also Matthew Bellis, who is just one of our board and staff members. And I went in mostly positive. I think Doug and Matt had no idea what to expect. They're not
Mm,
as steeped in like the Libertarian Party and political coalition world as I
for
am.
sure.
So they heard a lot of the like, what some of the naysayers had to say, but then they came away completely like, this is not only amazing, but like we need more of this kind of thing
I
in
mean,
the movement.
did they get to see the prayer between Jordan Peterson and Russell Brand?
Yes,
I
that
thought of you.
was.
I was like, this is going to make people go. That made heads explode. That was a head explode moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it was so like the prayer was the icing on the cake to that entire conversation that Jordan and like half conversation, half they were in an intellectual rap battle of sorts with each other.
Yeah.
But it was so refreshing to hear like someone really pushing Jordan Peterson to because it's always there in the things that Jordan talks about with his ideas of individual responsibility and cleaning your room
Hmm.
and setting order to chaos and pairing that with sort of the newfound faith that Russell Brand has and marrying that to his already Russell's always been more on the libertarian anarchist spectrum, and so to see them kind of blend their styles and rhetoric together was just like uh, I mean, it was mind blowing, to say
Spiritual
the least.
synergy. I don't know how else
Yes,
to call it.
yeah, no, I definitely agree. So you've talked a little bit. I think we've already uh, gone over sort of like what sort some of the inspiration for this was. What was the key message that you wanted people to take away from the Rescue the Republic rally, and do you think that message was successfully delivered?
Yes. So yes, let me walk that backwards. Yes, I think the message was successfully delivered. I think the biggest takeaway is that it was a huge unity event. People got up there and expressed ideas that weren't 100% in alignment, and everybody was well received. Jimmy Dore is the best example. And this is an unfortunate thing about not all, but some of the anti-war left. When we did Rage Against the War Machine 2.0, they were like, we don't even want to share a physical stage with some of those speakers of Rescue the Republic. They are Zionists. I hear you say it's going to be another event separate on the next day. I don't want to walk on the same ground. Brothers and sisters in Christ and anti-warness and libertarianism and leftism and whatever it is, right? Brothers and sisters, we don't go out and share our views so that we can hear people who agree with us say, yes, you're right. The whole point of outreach is to reach people who disagree. And Jimmy Dore got the message. I cannot sing his praises enough. He got the message. He got up there and he was outspoken on an issue that he was so passionate about. And I agree with him on, which is that the Israeli government is doing a terrible, terrible thing by murdering, maybe genociding innocent women and children and people in Palestine. And do you know what everybody did? They clapped and applauded, and they were so glad to hear from him, including people who don't agree with him. That was like, I think the most important thing about Rescue the Republic is coming together in unity on almost everything and like loving and appreciating each other and hearing each other, even in areas of disagreement.
Yeah, so what you said there brings me to a question. I wasn't sure where I wanted to throw it in, but I'm going to throw it in here because I think it's perfect. Because I understand where some of the people you're speaking about who were like, I don't want anything to do with these Zionists, and they'll probably use even meaner words
Yes.
sometimes, like
Yes.
Israel shills and all sorts of
Yes.
stuff. And listen, I get it. I mean, I'm literally on probably episode 6 or 7 of a series on my mainline podcast where I'm just like trying to beat dispensationalism
Oh,
into
yeah.
a pulp.
Yep.
And no one, like, in terms of like, from a Christian perspective, I feel like I am the most forward facing in trying to make the Christian case for anti-war, pro-peace, and not just sort of uncritically supporting everything that the government of Israel does.
Yeah.
That said, and I know we're pretty much aligned on that. That said, I very much agree with the sentiment of what you're saying in terms of like, well, I don't think our jobs as Christians or libertarians is to just put ourselves in front of people who we already agree with and just be preaching to the choir nonstop. And I've noticed, we've noticed, I think, both you and I over the years, uh, different strains of behavior and sort of like almost like a psychological element.
Yeah.
And it's not even just in libertarians. I notice it in Christians too sometimes. But I finally found a name for this the other day, and it's called the Jonah Complex, which
Yes.
is like so true. It's a psychological term, but it's also like obviously harkening back to a biblical idea. And you think about Jonah, who didn't want to go and give a message of repent and redemption to the people of Nineveh. Like his objections weren't so much ones of like personal safety, although maybe there was some of that, but it was kind of more of like this like elitist like, well, we're the people of Israel and I'm a prophet of the Lord and you're a holy God. They don't deserve me to go there and to tell them to do better. I don't want them to do better. I don't want them to repent. I want to just see you smite them right now.
Yep.
And it's a and even deeper than that, it can be the Jonah complex can be described as like a fear of success, a fear of putting one outside of their comfort zone. And it seems like this is what is motivating a lot of libertarians and like I said, Christians too. I see this sometimes as well. But it's like
Yep.
we don't want to actually offer people redemption. We don't want to go to the places where people actually need to hear our voices and our arguments and ideas the most. We just want to condemn them and make fun of them on Twitter, make our make edgy jokes and comments about them on Twitter, which I'm not even saying I'm completely innocent of, because sometimes when you're watching the horrors of what's going on in Gaza, you can be motivated to be very
Yeah.
vengeful.
Well,
But
it's
is
fun
that
to do
moving the
that
needle?
too. Yeah. I mean, maybe occasionally it is. But I know that when you speak to people from the heart, face to face, you got a better chance. So I want to do that. It's, I feel like Jonah didn't get like the message, like God loves Antifa too, or whoever those degenerate weirdos are in Nineveh. He's like, "Eh, take the message." And I was just like, let's take the anti-war message to all the really nice MAGA Maha people who are in the mindset and attitude, like they're in a place to receive right now. It's a very open and welcoming place. Like it's a good place to present someone with a new idea because that's literally why they're all going. Like they're going to unify with people that they would normally not agree with. So it's the perfect time. That's also why I had the National Libertarian Party tabling at the event, which was a wildly successful tabling event. People are like, "You can't do that." No, no. I was like, "It'll work out."
From what I could tell, because before I left, I went over there and talked to Luke and others who were at that table, and they said that it was like a wild hit. Like they were handing
Yep.
out tons of literature to Trump supporters, RFK supporters, people
Yep.
from all different backgrounds and kind of motivations for being there, including, which I thought was really like this was like such a white pill, literature on why tariffs are bad. To what was, and this whole thing was pitched, of course, by the naysayers as like a Trump rally. And I'm like, okay, well, like, if you're going to call it a Trump rally, then I'm going to tell you how we went there and, to the Trump rally and told all the Trump supporters that tariffs are
I
bad.
mean,
So,
if half the country is voting for Donald Trump and we want them to vote for libertarians, don't we have to go and do outreach to those people? I don't understand this like paranoia. I feel like we have the political like we're like the political version of the neurotic kid who doesn't want their peas on their cafeteria plate to touch their mashed potatoes or their meat or their like canned peaches. And I'm like, okay, but we're not like peas, and that's not the
I
real
wasn't
world.
expecting such personal attacks when you came on today.
Yeah. But it's like we don't get to operate in a vacuum anywhere else in the world. Why would you like if you get elected, then you're what? One, let's say we get someone in Congress. You're one and then there's 434 people that you have to work with who are not in your political party. So start practicing now.
Well, so a passage that came to mind is Matthew 9:37 through 38. The harvest is ripe, but the harvesters are few. And
Yeah.
that's what I feel like when I look at the
Yeah.
political landscape right now. There are actually so many people, and what gets me angry is, and you'll remember so many of the post-libertarians and whatever they wanted to call themselves, going on for years how, like, listen, the Ron Paul thing's in the past. The libertarian moment has come and gone. And I feel like, even though, granted, there's lots of reasons to look around the world and kind of be a little bit like nervous and discouraged about the way things are headed, simultaneously, I've become more white pilled on libertarian like outreach
Yeah.
and Christian evangelism for that matter, because I see more of a hunger in people and a receptiveness to these ideas. I mean, I think the fact that someone like Russell Brand has come to Christianity and he's like the tip of the spear of celebrities and just people in general kind of having a renaissance of sort coming back to the church. But there's also a lot of people, and listen, they're not perfect, but people like RFK and people in these various coalitions, they are generally moving in the direction of we need less state in our life and not more. And it
Right.
seems like something we should be, absolutely capitalizing on. Something you mentioned in your speech, which you gave after the event online, is that one of the important elements you wanted people to consider is that we have to learn to trust each other, and that
Yes.
there's a risk to trusting each other, but you pose that there's actually a greater risk to not trusting each other. Could you elaborate on what you meant by these risks and why you think the one risk is greater than the other one?
We're a minority, you know, and we're a very small minority. And if we, I think that, okay, so I want to talk about different types of risks here. Politically, it's riskier for us to just do nothing and not work with anyone. Because if we work with other people who are in agreement about like 50% of our ideas, there's a very good chance that we're going to be able to make further advancements with people who are, greater in numbers and also wield political influence than if we go it alone. And history, I think, is a very good indicator of that. And certainly things, can happen. You can have black swan events throughout history. But I think history shows, how the Libertarian Party has fared on its own. I think there's like a moral, psychological, and spiritual risk for refusing to work with other people, sort of like the Jonah Complex, and rejecting opportunities that are put in front of you. I think it's unhealthy. I think it degrades your credibility in the eyes of others. I think people will take you not very seriously. And there are people who are mad at me for doing these things, and that's fine. The people who are on the outside looking in, they're not really interested in what like the cult of Ronar and the people who are just solely focused on prostitution and child sex change. They don't really care what's happening there. They care that we're trying to advance libertarianism in the areas that it also aligns with populism. They're like, oh, wow, because they've heard of the populist things, like being dissatisfied with the FBI and FEMA, being pro free speech, all of that really good stuff. And I think the risk of throwing that away is just really great. It's damaging to our reputation. I think it's very demoralizing. It's a demoralization campaign internally. And, like it's a risk I'm not willing to take. And certainly it's risky to work with people who don't agree with you. I can tell you it's risky to work with people who say they do agree with you. But if you're unwilling to work with anyone, what does that say about you?
Yeah, and there's something really ironic about, and I'm not qualified, nor am I going to dive too deep because I don't want to distract our conversation into intra-libertarian party drama and arguments. But I will say that just a general thing that doesn't even apply to things going on currently, there's always been a strain of libertarians who have this very ironic, for lack of a better word, pharisaical approach
Yeah.
to Libertarian Party activism, where it's kind of, you said, kind of like this focus on procedure and bylaws
Hmm.
and I'm not saying, and this, listen, like, the reason I use the word, pharisaical to describe that is to invoke the legalism versus trusting the truth of the spirit is a Christian struggle, right? And I think
Yep.
libertarians have a similar struggle where we we are trying to do what's best to advance liberty and to just do what's right, but some people seem to be weaponizing rules and procedures not to enhance that, but rather as a like a limit or a defeater, which it seems like we as libertarians are often, as much as we like to rail against the duopoly and how it sabotages libertarians and all that, which I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but I feel like we are really our own worst
We
enemy
are
most
our
of the
own worst.
time.
Let me share this analogy with you and everyone who's listening. I hope lots of people are listening. I'm going to share this so much. Have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons or any game similar to that, a role-playing game?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say you're in your D&D game and there's a dispute between the players, some of them are inexperienced, and the dungeon master about what the rules are and how far the rules can go and what the dungeon master can decide. And so he's like, "Okay, you know what? We're going to pause the game and we're going to make a little like committee and we're going to iron all of this out so that you new people like you can figure it out." And gradually over the course of the next month, if you're meeting once a week, the game is played less and less, and the rules committee slowly takes the place of the full game. And every day you get together, every meeting you get together and you meet to discuss the rules of what you'll do when you one day play the game. And that is what the Libertarian Party is, my friend. We are a rules committee. We have rejected the real game.
Yeah. And again, it's not even to say that there isn't a need to find some cohesion or balance there, but you can go too far
Yeah.
into legalism, and you can go too far into just disregarding uh rules and procedures entirely. So it's definitely something to consider, I think. A lot of people, though, like even if you got past that, they seem to, I don't know, a lot of people say, no, we're okay with issue coalitions, we're okay with coalition building. But then if
Mhm.
you ask them to, like, all right, well, how should we do it? It seems like, they don't actually have a roadmap or a realistic idea of how that's
No.
supposed to work. Why is coalition building crucial for libertarians? Especially with individuals or groups we might not completely agree with, and like, is there a risk there in so far as, like, you know, how do we stay grounded in the truth and not deluding ourselves when we're engaging in these coalitions?
Well, coalitions give you numbers. You have strength in numbers, you have expanded resources, opportunities, connections, all of that good stuff. So it just makes the work literally easier. As far as staying grounded, I mean, like maybe staying rooted is a good way to look at it. You need to find and make sure that you're sticking to core areas of agreement that are also, like foundational, like principal things that you agree in. So you don't want to get so far out into coalition building that you're now working on things that you don't believe in, just to advance some other thing. I think, does that explain that?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I suppose people might ask, to bring this back to the rally, uh, is there a danger to, say, being part of a rally where there's a lot of people who are supporting a candidate and a party that is, maybe not just like a little bit off from libertarianism, but that seems to have a lot of glaring flaws? And do we risk, like, I'm trying to steelman the concern here,
Sure.
which would be that, well, if the Libertarian Party is seen as being part of this coalition that seems to be supporting Trump, are we then marketing the Libertarian Party as like the GOP light, or like the like, to use a sports analogy, like the recruiting team, or like the AA
Hmm.
team or something like that? So how do you navigate those sorts of concerns?
I think it's a reason. It's a risk. I will say that people view us as GOP light anyway. That is literally what they say, that we're Republicans who like weed and guns. That is what we are always called. We do have our own presidential candidate. Unfortunately, we're in a year where, we have a candidate who is fairly polarizing internally. I don't know how much of the rest of the country realizes that, and I try not to elevate that when I do a lot of external facing media. But if we miss this opportunity, I think it kneecaps us in a way that is a greater risk.
Sorry, couldn't get to my mute button quick enough. So I definitely agree with the concern of like not wanting to alienate people. And there really is no, like, if you're going to do anything worthwhile, it's going to come with risks. There is no risk-free proposition unless if it's risk-free, it's probably not worth doing because there's nothing substantial to gain. How do you handle, like, so for example, I saw so many people very critical of this rally, like we alluded to before, from the kind of anti-Zionist perspective. And to be fair, Trump came out with some very, not very sympathetic towards the Palestinian comments, in the days preceding the rally, including like go finish the job and stuff like that. How do we handle that, and how do we actually begin to message to these people while we're working with them to make sure that we're trying to kind of budge them in the right direction, but without necessarily sabotaging the underlying coalition? Because I'm sure you've had real like life experience with this, because like I'm sure it's very difficult trying to maintain a coalition this large where you can have, very what's the word here? Very emotionally charged disagreements that could lead to people like, all right, we're not going to speak with these people and we're not going to associate with these people. And then people start attacking each other and it all falls apart and then no good is accomplished. So what has your experience been like that? How have you navigated those tensions?
I lost you for a second, but I think I got the idea. Is how do I navigate it when people are like, I'm not going to speak with this guy, and the other guy's like, I'm not going to speak with that guy. So I have that all the time, and I just kind of have to take it speaker by speaker, org by org. But ultimately, like, if you're on board, you got to be in service to the mission. So I will hear people out. I will listen to all grievances, and then I just push forward, and I try to bring everybody with me. Some people require a little bit more hand-holding than others. Some people, I had a handful of people really blow up my phone, and I was like, you know what? I just don't have the time and energy. I'm going to let someone else handle it and respond to it. And if people are so sour, bitter, whatever, that they can't come and they want to, speak ill of us, then I just cut it. I just cut it off. I'm like, okay, well, I'm a very busy person, so I just don't have the time and energy, but I also don't have the time and energy to badmouth them online. I would much rather them change their mind and rejoin, than for me to burn that bridge and be like, well, screw you. I don't like what you try to blow me up. Like, I just let it go.
So on the idea of the, you said, so you try to keep people focused and, navigating issues one at a time. So if we have Trump coming out and making these comments and you, like, for example, have, let's say someone says like, I can't speak to on this stage anymore because these people are supporting Trump and he's so pro-Zionist. Like, do you try to persuade that person then and there, or do you try to okay.
Yeah. So I have a very good relationship with a lot of people on the Trump campaign, people who are literally on the campaign, people who are adjacent to it, Republican senators. My position that I always bring them is, libertarians, we really don't want the United States government assisting in mass murder. What can we do from a very pragmatic perspective to chisel a little bit of that away? How do we have less people killed? And that sounds so dispassionate and uncaring, when you are invested in like actually making a change and saving people's lives, it is, I think, for me at least, it's too much to be super emotionally like in it. Does that make sense? So
I
while
think that, yeah.
we're all arguing about like rallying and sharing a stage, I'm just like, can I have some foreign policy crumbs? I'll take the crumbs. Because if we could save just like 50, 100 people's lives over there, if we could shave off like one drone strike, it may not seem like a big deal to us over here who are in the anti-war movement and mad, but believe me, it makes the biggest difference in the world to the people that we saved and their family members and everybody who realizes it. And so I'm just totally focused on that. And not to be crass, but it is eat shit and move things forward. And that's what I'll do. And that is the shit, that I have to eat and to deal with is the real world trolley problems. I have to actually contend with it when you get to this level. And I'm glad that I have the fortitude to do it because I do think that it saves people's lives and it moves us closer to peace.
Yeah, I wonder if I mean, put it this way, the only candidate who's actually anti-Zionist and would really want to speak critically of Israel is, well, I actually don't know Jill Stein's opinion on this, so maybe she would be too.
Jill
But would
Stein is
be
very anti-Zionist.
okay. Let's go. So there's two. There's her, and then there's Chase. Neither of them are going to win, and so it seems like we do kind of have to recognize that. Well, like again, I'm not super happy about it, but it's either going to be Trump or Harris at the end of
Yep.
the day. And if we're able to at least have some influence on the Trump campaign and on Trump supporters and the people who are, pressuring that
Yeah.
side, like, hey, this is their base, it's their constituents and whatnot. And listen, I'm an ANCAP. I'm as skeptical as you can be in terms of like, do we live in a system where we have the consent of the governed and our politicians really represent us? I'm not saying I don't believe that stuff is actually how our government works or how our country is really run. But it also doesn't have zero influence. We have seen plenty of time where enough public outcry
Yes.
can influence politicians. So I wonder if we just have more like it's an uphill battle either way, but do we have more of a potential path to maybe not total peace, but de-escalating some of the war machine by trying to speak to the Trump base than we do uh, the Harris base? I don't think that the Harris administration cares at all for what
Correct.
their
We
base
do.
says on this issue.
You're correct. You're correct. So, you have sort of this like asymmetrical lineup politically. More Harris supporters are very opposed to what's happening in Israel and Palestine. But the Harris administration, the regime, does not care what their supporters think. I think that people in Donald Trump's administration, and people will scream when I say this, whatever, more people in that administration are quietly concerned about it and don't like it. They are just going to suck it up and go forward with it, but they are paying attention to what their constituents say, and they're paying attention to the anti-war shift in the GOP. Now, it's mostly been with Ukraine, not Israel, but it's still huge. The fact that there's been an anti-war shift in the GOP is really huge. And the dissident right, who don't necessarily claim the mantle of GOP, they absolutely hate what the Israeli government is doing. So yeah, it is more, you are more likely to persuade people on the other side. And conservatives are just, in this day and age, more open to hearing you out and having rational discussion too. I mean,
Well,
like
that seems
I got to sit down across from Donald Trump and talk to him about fentanyl and be like, yeah, my husband was like, you should, death penalty, it doesn't really even work. It's so small when they smuggle it in, you can't really catch them. He was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
do you think part of the problem is that as libertarians we generally don't have political power and all we have
Yes.
is rhetoric? And so
Yes.
perhaps part of the issue here is that when we're looking at Democrats, Republicans, or just politicians in general, we care solely, or at least inordinately, about the rhetoric and less
Mm-hmm.
about the results and what might happen on a policy level. And like I think, like, for example, and it's a mixed bag, right? But Trump was often, with his rhetoric on uh, things concerning like Russia, um, and I think he was under a lot of pressure. His rhetoric wasn't always perfect, and he did make a couple of mistakes there. But we did have peace when he was in charge there, and I think if he had won another term, we wouldn't have had the outbreak of war between Ukraine and Russia like we ended up having.
I agree. I
So,
think we
and
might also have not had October 7th with Hamas. I
yeah, I
don't
think
know
that's
if I would have agreed with every foreign policy decision that kept that from happening. And that's where
it gets dicey.
it gets dicey. But I don't
Yeah.
think that would have happened. I think there's a very good chance.
Well, and I guess to some extent we are charting terror. I mean, some people suggest that we've like tried strategies like this before, but I don't know that it's exactly
No,
true.
I
There
don't think
have,
so. Because I have
yeah,
not encouraged, and I do not encourage libertarians to flood the GOP. This is completely different. This is
right,
stay where you're at, hold the line, but also reach out your hand. Like you lose all power when you jump out of the LP. The LP is like a critical role because this is the voting bloc and the
right.
signaling mechanism to the swing vote. So this is where this is where it's at.
Well, because some people would say, like, well, if you think this is the path forward, why don't you just join the
Mm-mm.
GOP and work from
No,
within? But as you're saying, there's something to the Libertarian Party and the voting bloc it represents
correct.
that puts people like you and others in the Libertarian Party orbit in a unique ability to work to make these coalitions, which can change public perception
Mm-hmm.
push on politicians, but that also can leverage the voting bloc in specific directions as well. Can you speak about the specific ways in which libertarians you think should be thinking about that strategy a bit more and how that can be an effective means of using the party?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to be open to talking to people and hearing from presidential frontrunners in the other two parties, and you need to focus on basically one area at a time. If we get to the point where we can do more, that's great. But I view it as radical pragmatism. Abolish one agency at a time. You know, this time it's Department of Education. You just come up with like a list of just two to three requests, because when it gets more than that and then it gets like kind of watered down and like they're not going to get them all, and eyes on the prize, two to three, and make them very powerful. And then even if you just get one, like it's amazing. It starts though by being willing to having an open dialogue and by being focused on the right thing, which is policy and elections. Do not focus all of your energy on Robert's Rules of Order. Do not focus all of your energy on how many people have read Man, Economy, and State. Those things are not going to win you elections, and I hate to say it, they're not going to advance liberty nationwide.
So, uh, in terms of Rescue the Republic had specific goals, as did Rage Against the War Machine. I don't know if you want to. We talked about war and mandates. And you brought the Department of Education. What are, other than those, specific coalition goals that you think are most important for libertarians to be looking to leverage our voting bloc, leverage coalitions,
Yep.
in the near future on?
Rage Against the War Machine, I think an easily attainable one is pardon Julian Assange. That was one of our list. That's something off of our list of demands. And I think that that's doable over the next 4 years. I don't think it'll happen on day one, like I hope Ross Ulbricht happens, but I think it could happen by the end of the term. Rescue the Republic had 8 pillars of its movement. There were things that me, Matt Toon, and Brett Weinstein all wrote and decided together. Protecting free speech, I think, is one that is something that libertarians should coalition on, and it's very important. And everybody's like, "Oh, the two parties are the same," but Harris and Walz have come out pretty openly against free speech. They really do want there to be censorship of speech. Democrats are talking about how the First Amendment is like a real barrier to keeping control. Al Gore has made comments about it. Hillary Clinton has made comments about it. Tim Walz has made comments about it. Kamala Harris talks about how she thinks, what's happening on Twitter is terrible. They need to crack down on social media speech laws. There need to be laws, not just internal governance. So that is a really great area to do coalition work on.
Yeah, and I know that there's been even a lot of raising of awareness of things like Defend the Guard with a lot of people in these various groups that we're coalitioning with. Have you seen a lot of potential I know a lot of libertarians are concerned mostly about the Libertarian Party's electoral success. And while I tend to be a bit more pessimistic in terms of our odds there, I do think that it is something to at least want to see grow in the future. How can is there a way to, in the long term, be not just leveraging these coalitions and voting blocs to affect policy change, but to then funnel that growth into the movement and the party long term?
That has always been my plan. We struggle to get people elected, but our candidates need something to attach themselves to, besides terrible things that are burned in people's memory, like James Weeks stripping on stage, what is something where you're like, Libertarian Party, oh, they did that. Policy wins are a really good one. The libertarians can be like, oh yeah, we're the party that advanced Defend the Guard. That would be perfect. We're the party that did X, Y, and Z. Now, if we get a cabinet member, I think that you're going to see people start to win federal elections within 2 election cycles. That will be a complete game changer for how electable we are. So everybody's screaming, that I'm not paying attention to the right things. Yes, I am. I am trying to give our candidates a very quick leg up.
Well, and it occurs to me that there's also opportunity no matter which way this election goes. If Trump wins and delivers on certain things, you can then spin that to be like, okay, well, libertarians now have more of a, as you say, sort of a path to being, like, because half the battle is just getting people to know we exist and to consider our ideas. But if Trump loses, I think there's also the great potential for, or if Trump wins and doesn't deliver on certain things, because that's also a possibility. People could be disillusioned with the ability of the Republican Party to be their home or be the place that they necessarily want to, put all their eggs in. And so that, although I know a lot of people, and I kind of get it. I mean, I've tried to be fair to Chase. I've had him on my show. There's plenty of things that I agree with Chase on, but I understand he's not every libertarian's cup of tea.
Right.
But even if we had even if we would say I had a candidate that all libertarians were united on, I think this year would just be tough to get people to show up and vote for. It seems like I've used this analogy. People are going to be trapped in this, what we call like the lesser of two evils dilemma, unless they think the stakes have either risen to a certain point where like they know that that's not going to work, or if we lower the stakes to the point where they feel like they can kind of take a chance and venture out of that comfort zone. But right now we're kind of like we're not, things aren't so bad that people are like, we're not like in a full collapsitarian sort of nightmare, which I don't want.
No, me neither.
But things are still too bad for people to really feel like, oh man, I'm like, yeah, I might not like either of these two candidates. Like they don't check all my boxes, but they still feel pressured to like they have to support one of them. Whereas if we can find ways to, pump the brakes a little bit, that might be beneficial for us long term.
Yeah, we need to lower the stakes the next election for sure. I am optimistic about that. I don't think it's going to be a 100% libertarian paradise during the Trump administration, but I think that some of the tension and misery is going to be dialed down, and people are going to feel more comfortable voting for third parties. Ideally, we'll have a libertarian in the cabinet, and that's going to shoot us up in name recognition and trust. We have a branding issue right now. that I'm working very hard to fix. Yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic about the future. Like it's a scary thing, and I'm optimistic about it anyway.
As we're getting close to the end of our time here, I want to bring it back to the rally from the past weekend a little bit. What's the future for both of these entities, Rage Against the War Machine and Rescue the Republic? Are those going to continue to do events in the future? How do you anticipate those potentially evolving
Hmm.
as time progresses?
I don't know. I think some of it's going to depend on how much time I have. I think I know Nick wants to continue Rage Against the War Machine. Nick Brana, my partner in crime there, and I think that Brett and Matt want to continue the Rescue the Republic. I know that we're all very, very exhausted. We put on a huge, like 40,000 person event, um, and it was all volunteer work. I mean, we paid vendors, but Matt and Brett and I didn't get paid for it, and we have a lot of staff that we hired for the event, like contractors who still have not been paid. Most everybody's been paid, but it's like I'm still fundraising. By the way, jointheresistance.org, please donate to pay the last handful of our bills. Like we want a little bit of a break, but it's an incredible movement that we've started, and people want to continue the movement. And so I want libertarianism to continue to be front and center with it.
Yeah, I would. I mean, how do you imagine libertarians can continue to leverage, like, if maybe it's not even this specific banner, Rescue the Republic, but like these groups are still hopefully going to be, carrying the energy that came. I mean, just to give you
Yep.
my thoughts on that rally, like, and I've shared them several places, but people keep on wanting to convince me it was a Trump rally, and I was like, okay, I'm not saying that there weren't elements to the event where, yeah, there were people getting up and expressing their support for Trump, but that was kind of like, to me, the afterthought. And
Yeah.
it wasn't even like the focus was less on, well, we have to elect Trump, otherwise like the nation's doomed, and that's just like the end. It was like, no, like the focus seemed to be on the issues and the unity that existed between these diverse groups. And it seemed like a lot of the speakers acknowledged, like, hey, we actually don't all agree on everything. I mean, I got a chance to meet Dave Rubin, which is funny because Dave Rubin's blocked me on Twitter because I've been critical of Zionism. But it's like, you know
Yeah.
what? Like, I'm like, even though I obviously like could take that very personally and just start like lobbying attacks at him and stuff, it's like, okay, Dave Rubin also has helped to like advance things like Rumble and free speech
Yep.
for Americans and for content creators. And Dave Rubin is also one of the people who has been very good at I guess like fostering a bit more of like tolerance within the conservative movement, kind of pulling them
Yes.
away from kind of the more puritanical,
Yeah.
legalistic kind of stuff. So it's
Well,
like,
he's in an interesting spot being a gay dude with babies.
right, exactly. And it's not that like, as I'm more of a social conservative just in my religious views, but I can appreciate that Dave Rubin has impacted the political discourse in ways that are positive, even though I might also have disagreements with him on a couple things. And that seemed to be kind of the heart of what a lot of the rally was about, was that like we kind of like we have these differences, but like if we have all these commonalities too, shouldn't we try to focus on those and keep working together, keep talking to each other? Like I think we as libertarians have a chance to be part of that, or we can shy away from the moment and not
Yep.
capitalize on it. That seems to me to be like not like, listen, there's risks in everything, but I feel like the risk of staying on the sidelines and being able to pat ourselves on the back for like we maintained our libertarian purity, that seems to me like a greater risk for us to not try to move the needle effectively with a bunch of different groups and people who seem to be, again, like the harvest does seem ripe, in my opinion,
Yes.
for people to hear more libertarian ideas.
I'm 100% in agreement. That's what I want to do. I want to do outreach where the harvest is ripe. That's why I put this thing together. Heather Heying, Jimmy Dore, not people that I would consider Trump support. I mean, Jimmy Dore said on a Twitter Spaces that we did to promote this event that he was not voting for Donald Trump. I don't think every person on that stage was voting for Donald Trump. But every person on that stage did believe in the unity movement, and they want to heal a lot of the division in this country. And I think that libertarians should feel the same way. It doesn't mean that we forget every terrible thing that happened and we sweep it under the rug. I don't think that's the case at all.
Well, no, but we have to meet people where, I mean, Jesus didn't find his disciples and turn them into saints overnight.
Right.
I mean, they traveled with him for years, and he had to constantly. Now he would be, and I think you would agree with me. We do have to be willing to criticize these people at times. We shouldn't just pander them and fluff up all their bad unlibertarian takes. But
Sure.
just as like Jesus had a lot more critical things to say for the religious, like for like the people you would expect him to be in the most defense of. The people who were the religious leaders and who were like more on his side, he was very critical of. Whereas the sinners and the people who were fallen and confused and things like that, he would correct them, but he always did it in a spirit of gentleness and kind of building relationships with them and also kind of meeting their needs where they were at. And it feels like I just see so many corollaries between how the church struggled in the 90s and 2000s because they adopted this spirit of like legalism and puritanicalism. And it just feels like libertarians are trying to shake their own version of that, where it's not even just like your common that's maybe an insulting word. It's not just your everyday like average libertarian. Like even some of our thought leaders I've been critical of, because some of our thought leaders I feel like they're sometimes too like it's comfortable just to kind of like, I can sit on the sideline and write books, and write blogs, and write articles. Listen, make podcasts. I would, and like I can say I was right about everything. Like okay, and listen, we need people to write books and articles and make podcasts and try to impact culture there. But like clearly, all the libertarians doing that collectively isn't enough to actually change things. So some people got to get their hands dirty and actually start trying to, be willing to go in, to the dark places where it's not about compromising on what is true, but it is about trying to meet people where they're at. Because otherwise, we're going to just continue to be the very small minority who, can pat ourselves on the back because we're right about everything.
Yep. One piece of libertarian juicy gossip for your show.
Gossip hour.
I shut down doing the Pledge of Allegiance, and I said it's because I view it as idolatrous.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I thought that was perfect for this show.
What was the reaction to that? What was the reaction to that? I'm really curious now.
Shock and confusion. I was like, I don't put my hand over my heart and pray to the flag. And that is what you guys are doing. And I don't pray to the flag. I only pray to God, not skycloth.
See, no. I feel like people, I get so frustrated because like I've gotten to know you over the years and I see people who throw such vitriol towards you. And they just like, she's just shilling for Trump and she just wants to get on the Trump campaign and get a position and leave and join. I'm just like, and you tell me stories like this and I'm like, people don't see the stuff you do behind the scenes and you don't go out and brag about yourself and you need to hire a PR team.
I want to, I mean, I want to avoid, I lost my headphone.
Uh-oh.
That's one for my PR team. I want to avoid cult of personality. And I think that, that's something I could very easily lean into and I could make it the Angela show. I have all the connections to do that, but I don't think that's the right thing for the party. So I stay away from it.
But like, I bet you no one will like of your critics would
No.
expect, and
Well,
I hope they'll at least give you
no.
credit for like that. That's not an easy thing in your position to actually say, you know what, I don't want us to do the Pledge of Allegiance and to give the answer you gave. Like that's actually a very tough thing to do. I've done things like that in my church, but the stakes are a lot lower when I tell my pastor that like, hey, I don't think we should do the national anthem on the 4th of July. It's a lot different to be
Yeah.
in a giant political coalition with some really big names, and then be not just be able, and that's such a like a seed to plant in all these people's heads to start thinking like,
They were like, ha, it was like jaw dropped. I was like, I'll compromise. You can have the national anthem, but we are not pledging or worshiping the flag at any event I do. And so
that's
that was, yeah, it was fun. I mean, critics are going to be like, I'm not even looking at the comments on your live stream. Because there's probably a bunch of critics in it. Critics are going to sue me. They are going to yell at me. I have to block some of them on Venmo and PayPal, block them on all Patreon, support my Patreon, unless you're a crazy person. Imagine where we would be if they were doing things to advance liberty instead of like cyber stalking me. We would be in such a better place, I think. But not everybody's cut out for this. I would say that federal politics are very difficult. You are faced with a lot of challenging decisions, and the Libertarian Party has, at least for the last 15 years, operated like a social club. Social status is important. The rules committee, Dragons and Dungeons and Dragons analogy is very relevant. Like, that's what matters. People don't say, oh, I'm going to go out and I'm going to learn a whole bunch of municipal codes and slash them down. They say, I'm going to go learn Robert's Rules of Order so I can be the best person on our meeting. We're ready for a paradigm shift. So I'm trying to drag us there kicking and screaming. And I am so appreciative and grateful of the people who are like going willingly. And they're like, this is awesome. I'm so glad to be along for the ride. I won't be in the driver's seat forever. I need to train people to take my place and to do the tough work and do it willingly. You got to have a very thick skin. And along the way, I hope that this whole thing brings us closer to God and brings God's kingdom to earth.
Well, amen to that. Angela, last question. What was your favorite moment or like favorite thing said, line you can remember, speech given of the entire weekend?
Amen. When the entire group said amen together after Russell Brand and Jordan Peterson's prayer.
That was pretty good. Yep. It's so sad that people are not like, we always want to assume the worst in people, right? And I see so many people like, oh, he's just grifting evangelicals. And I'm like, first of all, Russell Brand was a rich Hollywood star. He did not need to lower himself to just grifting evangelicals. Like he had a much better grift before.
I don't think is he an evangelical?
Well, no, but they say he's grifting. That's the other thing. He's a Catholic, but they say he's grifting evangelicals. Right. And I'm like, listen, he's not perfect. His second baptism went much better. He had clothes on that time. But it's like, you know what? Like, let's just try to find the positive in things instead of always poking every possible hole we can in what people are doing. And I appreciate what you're doing, Angela, and appreciate you taking the time to come here tonight and talk about these recent events with me and my audience. Before I let you go, just any last minute things you want to plug, upcoming events, or just things that people should consider looking at.
Yes, please visit lp.org, join and donate if you have not done so before. If you want to support the good work I'm doing, you can go to patreon.com/Angela McArdle. You can find me on Substack and Locals as well. And shout out to our presidential candidates, Chase Oliver and Mike Termott.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Angela, again for being here. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I only had Angela for a short time here tonight, so I actually did not have the comments tab open at all. So I'm sorry I didn't get to anyone's comments. just didn't have that time tonight. But please make sure that you are subscribed, like this video wherever you're watching it. We greatly appreciate that. I have a couple live streams coming up this weekend with some Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania candidates. I'm continuing. It's been Libertarian Party week for the past 2 weeks. I've had a bunch of candidates, and I've had you on, and I'm having some more candidates on. So that's going to continue into this weekend. So everyone make sure that you're subscribed and stay tuned for that. And that's all I have for you guys tonight. As I always conclude by saying, live at peace, live for Christ. Take care, and talk to you next time.